students from the University of Tartu. Thank you very much for the comments you sent me and for the questions. Now, I thought about answering your questions in a very small and short video, but your questions were a bit too complicated to answer in a 2-minute video. So I made a document where I more elaborately answered your questions, and I will go through your questions very briefly. So the first question was about workers' autonomy and what it is and what can be done to increase the worker autonomy. So worker autonomy has to do with the freedom an individual has to carry out a task using her or his preferred methods, schedule and quality standards. Now, of course, in an organization there's always a set of rules and there's authority, there's coordination. But in general, there are ideas and practices by means of which the autonomy of individuals can be enhanced, and those are team-based organizations, where teams of persons are tasked with completing a specific service or product or whatever, but within the team there is considerable freedom to set up a schedule or work at specific hours or whatever, and people can align within the team to work according to their preference. And especially in education and in healthcare, people are experimenting with these teams. If you want more, please refer to my document. The second question was about PSM being used to whether it is widely used in surveys. Basically, I don't know. I've seen PSM-like indicators being used in management development questionnaires, but they are not used at a national scale, or at least I am not aware of those initiatives. And please be aware that PSM, well, I also tried to show you that also in your sample there is a relation between PSM and job preference, but it's not a 100% accurate predictor. So maybe it's also good to be a bit cautious about using PSM as a sole indicator. The third question had to do with which area of human resource management is most important. That's a personal preference. So I'm not an HRM professional, or I don't really specialize in HRM, but I'm a lecturer. I'm an instructor. So I would prioritize learning and development because I think that people can be learned and taught something, but that's my preference. So other people might focus on selection or coaching people to find other jobs or whatever. So that's really a personal preference. The fourth question has to do with why young people would choose to work in public sector, where arguably they might be more interested in the private sector. Two answers there. I think a lot of people that I know, at least from Rotterdam, are interested in finding solutions to societal problems, and then the public sector or not-for-profit organizations that are involved in dealing with societal issues may be a very interesting employer. And the second answer is that I know of many programs, of many what I call traineeships that are offered by public sector organizations, in which young recruits are really coached and they are given the chance to work on interesting projects. For example, 4 projects in 2 years, and again together with the intensive learning and development and coaching and well, development in general, personal development. It's really appreciated by young people, and these kind of traineeships are also offered by private sector organizations, I know, but my understanding, they are not as good as the traineeships that are offered by public sector organizations. So this could also be a way to attract young recruits to the public sector. How to bring changes in the management of the public sector. Does it start with national initiatives or with organizations? I think that's a question that I have a specific answer. I think it all starts with people in organizations, but that's because I am more of an organizational scientist and public administration scholar. I think legal professionals or legal scholars or even also political scientists might have a preference for starting with national initiatives. Again, it's a personal and professional preference. Please read my answer. If and how how are goals related to the motivation of public sector workers? In the lecture, I try to argue that it's the intrinsic or public sector motivation that is key. However, there are other people that argue that the goals of the organization should be translated into performance measures, and people should be awarded or at least given feedback how their behavior and how their individual performance relates to those performance measures. And this is more like an NPM-like view on how to motivate people, more with extrinsic motivation rather than intrinsic motivation. It's another school of thought, so I refer to it in my document. So please take a look at it and form your own opinion and go out and test your ideas, I would say. How useful would an NPM approach be to motivate public sector workers in developing countries? A slightly different question, I would say. I think it's really too complicated. The issue is too complicated to answer in a couple of sentences or in a couple of seconds. There is a huge variety of developing countries, and the situation in one country can be quite different from the situation in other countries. In some countries there is, I would say, a need for more government, and in other countries there's a need for a smaller government. And even then people, many different people might argue for different solutions. I have some ideas, they are in documents, but again it's a hugely complicated question. This is something I really am not at liberty of answering. How would you describe the management of public sector employees in Estonian context? I have very limited knowledge of the Estonian context, at least of the shop floor of the public sector in Estonia, so I choose not to answer this question. Apologies. Is it possible to detect a difference in the workplace community or friendliness in organizations and to compare it between the Nordic countries and the countries in the south? Well, this is, I think it has to do with culture, and we do know something about differences in national cultures. Some argue that differences in national culture say also something about differences in organizations between various countries. So what I did is I looked up the Hofstede's culture dimensions, and they're in the graph. I can show you. And Hofstede, Geert Hofstede is a sociologist, and he's quite famous for describing differences in national cultures in terms of 6 dimensions. What you can see is that if you accept this as a valid approach, you can see that Nordic countries are quite different from countries in the south, especially when it comes to power distance. So how people from various hierarchical levels interact with each other, whether they are more or less equal or there's a big difference. And this may say something about the friendliness of organizations in Nordic countries as opposed to Latin countries, or South European countries. So this will be my guess, and please take a look at the graph in document, and it may give you some kind of answer. Then the question about, there's someone who says that in Korea, South Korea, there is this very peculiar work culture, which is you could say it's a kind of a toxic work culture where people work very long hours, get very little sleep, and basically become exhausted, burned out, whatever. Is there any change in this toxic culture? First answer is I don't know about South Korea. I do know about in China there is now some pushback. So young people try to resist this toxic culture. And my second, I don't have a solution to this, obviously, but as I tried to explain in the document, for you, there may be a moment in your career where some senior person asks you to do an assessment or to coach and supervise younger people. Before you know it, you have a managerial role, and then I would like to invite you to ask yourself, what kind of a manager would you like to be? Okay, so far, thank you for your questions. Again, please take a look at the document for more elaborate answers, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person.